Welcome to the Opinion Show this week, which is going to look at the historic consent decree that was announced yesterday between the Department of Justice and the City of Cleveland that will obligate the city to make sweeping changes in police protocol, internal reports, accountability, as well as the what the mayor called the DNA of the future, and that is police community relations. We're here to talk about it, the editorial board of the Plain Dealer in the Northeast Ohio Media Group. I'm Elizabeth Sullivan. I direct that editorial board. I'm joined by Kevin O'Brien, the deputy editorial page editor for the Plain Dealer, as well as editorial writers Sharon Broussard, Pete Krouse, and Ted Diadiun. I'm going to ask Sharon to kick us off here because you were present for all of the briefings, all of the announcements. What's, in your view, the most significant part of this and also the most challenging part of this arrangement?
Oh, I'll take challenging first. I think the most challenging part is the money. Where's the money going to come to do all these kinds of things that are supposed to be done? The resources for the police officers, for example, and whatever else they may need to make this work. I guess the thing that struck me was about how much community engagement there is in this and accountability measures, where instead of the cops putting in simple reports after a use of force incident, even in a case where they might have just unbuttoned their, unholstered their gun or something like that. So even the lowest level has to be well documented. A supervisor is supposed to comb over it, make sure that you did it appropriately. If you did not, I guess there'll be some kind of, reprimand or something else that could happen to you. So it's just kind of a sense that there are a lot of eyes and ears watching the cops and making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do, but that's not without the community having a say, and also the police, because they would be on the police commission. They're guaranteed 3 seats, and they would sit with the community, and they might advise that something is not wise that the community wants to do, and have a chance to be a check and balance on that if necessary to keep cops safe. So I thought it was a rather surprising and optimistic document.
It's a 5-year consent decree, and it has this unusual feature that I believe was only present in the New Orleans consent decree of having an inspector general oversee this, as well as the court-appointed monitor. But what sort of assurance do we have that beyond those 5 years that change will be permanent?
There is no assurance. I mean, this is human beings working in, an imperfect process. It goes from the very highest level that there would be unbiased policing, which, Chris Evans, who he was here, would say is nearly impossible to do. But on the other hand, I guess the hope is that if these procedures are well implemented and everybody does what they're supposed to do consistently enough, when you get the new recruits coming in, that's their new culture. And that's now how they know how to do policing. And so when the monitor goes away and the Department of Justice said that could happen, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, however long it takes within that, within the framework, then that you hope is just deeply embedded in the culture, and that to do any of the other things the way they're doing them now would be so foreign and would feel so wrong, and the community would have some something to say about it, that you could not go back to the past. I think that's the hope.
So you mentioned unbiased policing. I think that surprised a lot of people that the consent decree covered issues of how communities of color were treated by the police department, even though the findings of fact after the DOJ investigation was really focused on use of excessive force. Do you think that that's significant, Pete? And what, the culture change that Sharon was talking about, do you think that can actually happen and within this in the context of this agreement?
I do. I think anything's possible. I think relations were so fractured and have been for so long. And basically, they kind of hit a breaking point, and these incidents around the country and here in Cleveland kind of set it in motion. And I think this is a healing document as much as it is a document as to how to go about police go about conducting their jobs. I mean, it's going to bring a lot of much needed professionalism. It's not going to be perfect. I mean, policing is an incredibly tough job. It takes a lot of courage and various skills, to be a good police officer. And we can't forget that. But it also takes an enormous amount of professionalism, and I think that was lacking. And as far as the unbiased policing, I mean, unbiased policing was like unbiased peopling. You know what I mean? I mean, as I think Dettelbach said, we all walk around with our biases, and I think things like racial profiling. We all racially profile in our lives, not just police, and I think this is going to create an awareness there where yeah, we can make improvements in that area, and it will probably lead to better relations down the road.
You mentioned Dettelbach, Steve Dettelbach, the U.S. Attorney for Northern Ohio. This is probably going to be seen as a big gain for him. They negotiated the consent decree in really what seems record time, based on what we were, considering as possibilities at the beginning of the year when these discussions, when actually there was a large series of community meetings, and they didn't begin negotiating the consent decree till after that. So, is he moving on after this? What do you think?
Dettelbach is an ambitious guy. He's a very capable guy. I mean, but what I know of Steve is that he approached this thing with the idea of doing it right. I don't think he had in the back of his mind, this is going to put a feather in his cap, type of thing. I think he went about this the way a professional U.S. attorney should have gone about it. And this thing hasn't even been finalized by the judge yet. I mean, we don't know. I mean, also I think the speed of this, I think a lot of this is to a certain degree is dictated by the events from around the country. Baltimore exploded. Ferguson, Missouri exploded. Remarkably, Cleveland did not explode. Everybody is trying to do everything they can to reach real understanding, and to do so in a way that does not, lead to violence.
Well, Cleveland still has a few charges, primed, and,
right.
And I think you're astute to raise that, because the cynic in me says this is a get us through the summer deal, where if we make the right promises right now, maybe we can tamp down the unrest. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's true. That might actually work. But I think the difficulty of translating these words on paper into a cultural change are just huge. And I think if you think this is going to be easy, somewhere on the spectrum from easy to actually doable, you may be dreaming. I think for the cop on the beat, what this says is there are new rules on what my superiors will back me up on, and I don't know what those rules are. I know what's on that paper, but I don't know what the rules really are, because the paper does not work out in the neighborhood.
Can I say that it's more than just the paper? There's also training involved in this, and so cops will be taught, for example, how to de-escalate situations and how to use other, instead of going for your gun, using lesser means of, the use of force. So it's more than just, I've got to read the paper and abide by it. If it comes a really good, strong training that can be put in place from time to time when cops need it, I think that it will make a difference.
Have you ever been through training that you thought was probably not the best thing for you?
Yes, unfortunately, I do say yes. I have.
And maybe it will be really good, but if you don't have buy-in at all levels of the police department,
I agree.
And the supervisors have to be really into this.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And what it's doing is creating a lot more accountability, which is good from our point of view, but it's bad from their point of view.
Yeah, I see
One
what
of
you
the
mean.
things we've called for editorially in the past was a change at the top, because we felt that a new safety director, especially given that he was the former chief of police during much of this time, would allow for more flexibility, and yet some of these accountability issues, such as actually filing reports when you unholster your weapon, if any use of force is used, actually having detailed reports so that those who are in a supervisory capacity can actually sort of see what's happening. That might lead to, and should, and that's why it's in the consent decree, lead to change. I don't know, Ted, what's your perspective?
Well, the thing I was thinking about when I was reading this is that the cop who has to do all this, I mean, these things were put together by a bunch of people behind desks who may or may not have ever actually had to carry these things out. And I don't know whether there were policemen involved in the creation of this problem. I'm guessing not, but
I understand police leaders. I'm not sure
yeah, but
if it was rank and file.
the cops I know, a lot of you talk about de-escalating it with conversation, and a lot of times, a cop, in order to gain the upper hand, goes over the top to brace somebody and to keep them from getting out of control. If you're gonna have him have to think before he draws his gun, or he's not allowed to use a chokehold to subdue people, that sounds fine sitting around this table here. It's tougher out on the street, and I think there are cops that are going to be killed because of this.
But I don't think they're saying you can't use those methods. I think what they're saying is that maybe they were turning to those methods somewhat reflexively, and that maybe better training, better understanding, they would use them more judiciously.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's what I think they're saying. I don't think this thing is saying that cops cannot use lethal force if it's called for. I think everybody take a step back, look at the way we do things. Analyze this. Something is not working here, and let's figure out what it is.
The opening statement in the consent decree says that this is to both save lives in the community and save the lives of police officers. That's one of the goals. And we just had the verdict in the Brillo trial. One of the assertions in that trial was that the denouement of that police chase, with 137 rounds being let loose all by police officers, actually put the police officers on the scene in jeopardy of their life and limb, and was reflective of perhaps a need for better training, oversight, et cetera, which is part of which is what helped lead to this investigation.
I would never say that the cops did everything right that night. Of course, there were major mistakes. But don't forget, we're sitting at this table talking about this because a guy didn't pull over when he saw the police lights in his rearview mirror. If he'd have done that, none of this would have happened. And and I think there's a lot. I just would love to know what the general police force, both black and white, just experienced and not experienced, thinks about this consent decree, and how they're going to make this work and still keep themselves alive and protect the community in the way that they try to do. And I think most of them are good people who do try to make that happen.
But the promise of resources, the promise of better training, more money. I remember being shocked when I saw how little a rookie police officer makes in the city of Cleveland, and that whole issue of how you pay, how you recruit, how you vet, new hires. I think that if it improves the quality of the force, if it improves their training, equipping, and pay, that the police officers are going to be in favor of that, and you kind of saw it during the pendency of this consent decree. And so far, fairly good reaction from all parties, surprisingly.
So far I think so.
And I would just say, but one more thing though, and Kevin touched on it as far as how this is all going to sink in. It really is from the top down, the supervisors, the leadership, the chief of police. If they want all this stuff to sink in, they're going to have to insist that it does, because if they don't, things will just revert back.
Mm-hmm.
Things are going to revert to an extent anyway. Every time you make a rule, there's a subsection of people who are going to make it their business to try to figure out how to get around it. And that'll happen here, and that might actually save some lives, I think. because I'm with you. I think this puts police officers in the position of having to think twice about things that they don't have time to think twice about. And I think it gives their superiors and the political side of the equation more room to second guess what they do in the field. And I don't think either of those things is particularly good.
Well, wait a minute. In some of the cases we're talking about, people could have thought twice. They could have thought twice before, they rolled up on Tamir Rice and just started shooting out the window. Or before they
No
tried to get a
argument at all.
mentally
Right.
ill
Yeah.
woman, whose family had said she was ready to go. She resists, and all of a sudden, she's thrust to the ground, and whatever happened to her, happened to her. So, I think having the cops think twice in some situations is good, and collecting
Right.
data on that to see, was that the right decision or was that not? And just seeing if there's a pattern or practice that people are engaging in that is just not working and that's doing more harm to the community than good.
And that is going to have to be our last word, but thank you all for offering your insights, and I'm sure we will be talking about this more. We're interested in your reactions to this consent decree. Where do you think its positives, its pitfalls might be? Where would you like our editorial board to really be focusing our advocacy as we go forward with this process? Please leave your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.